everyone, thank you for stopping by. I'm Samantha with Clawfoot Farm, and today we're in the kitchen and we are making some fermented salsa today. I'm so excited. It is so yummy and I can't wait to show you how easy it is to make fermented salsa. So let me show you the ingredients first. So what we have, we have some tomatoes. These are the very last tomatoes from our tomato plants this year. So we're using some tomatoes. We're using the very last of our jalapeno peppers from our garden this year also. We're using onions and we're using garlic. Now I am going to give you kind of a guideline of how to do this because I'm not measuring. This is how many tomatoes I have to use, so that's how many tomatoes I am going to use. The only part that you really want to watch the measurements of ingredients is for the salt and water brine. That is what's going to create the atmosphere in your salsa to actually let it ferment and not mold. So that's what we want. We want it to ferment and all of those probiotics and all those enzymes to really grow and add flavor, and also it will add a lot of beneficial bacteria for a healthy gut as well. Well, the first thing that I'm going to do is chop up my ingredients. I'm going to start with tomatoes. It doesn't really matter which one you start with. I'm just going to chop these up and let's see here. There we go. So I'm just going to chop these up into, see, these are like probably saladette sized tomatoes, and I'm just going to chop these into about eighths, really just into big bites. You can use a food processor also to chop up all of your pieces, but today I'm using a knife because the food processor tends to make the pieces a little bit smaller, and I'm really looking for a chunky salsa today. But if you want your salsa to be a little saucy instead of a little chunky, it's a perfect time to grab your food processor and cut everything up. You also, if you're using a food processor, you don't have to chop all these ingredients up separately. You can do this all together as one, and that would really save you some time. So I'm just doing these into some big bite-sized pieces. And I'm just going to continue chopping these up until they're all done. Now that we've got all of the tomatoes chopped up, I'm going to do the same thing with the onions and the garlic. And I'm going to need another bowl because that one is pretty full. But if you don't have this many, you can put them all in the same bowl. I'm just using a separate one because this bowl is full. So for what we're doing right now, I'm going to be using probably 4 onions. But again, use whatever you think is good. That is the beauty of doing a fermented recipe, is that there's not any specific measurements. And it lets you play with your ingredients a little bit. I'm just going to chop these into like big bite-sized pieces. And this would be a good time if you wanted to use the food processor to do that, because then you'd get less tears in your eyes from chopping all the onions. There's 1 onion done, 3 more to go. Alrighty, so we have all of the onions and the garlic chopped up, and they're in here. I used a whole bulb of garlic, and I just chopped it. Again, it's just a rough chop for all of the ingredients in here. And now we're gonna do the peppers. So our peppers, we have some jalapeno and some poblano peppers, and it's just a mixture of them from our garden, and I just used what we had. So use whatever peppers you like, and I just cut the tops off. And our salsa we like probably on the low to medium for spiciness. So I just take my finger on the inside of this and scrape out most of the seeds. Just like that. But not all of them. I don't really worry if there's still some seeds in there. And that way it gives it kind of, it's not mild, but it makes it a good medium salsa. So I'm just cutting the tops off, scraping out some of the seeds. And again, I'm just gonna give it a rough chop and put it in my bowl. And then we're ready to make the salsa. The hardest part about this is not really hard, but it's the most tedious part about this is actually just the prep work of chopping this up. So really, if you have a food processor and you want it to be a little bit more chopped up, just throw it in the food processor and it's super quick. You also could make this in stages. If you wanted to just put the peppers by themselves, you could make pickled peppers. You could make pickled or fermented peppers, pickled or fermented onions, and then pickled or fermented tomatoes all separately. And then when you are ready, chop them up and make a salsa right there. I am wearing gloves while we do these peppers, and it's a good idea to wear some gloves because the oils and the peppers will stay on your hands for a few washes afterwards. And typically what happens to me if I don't wear gloves is I will forget that I had been chopping peppers, and I will touch my face or my eyes. That is not a good afternoon. Wear gloves while you're chopping peppers. You don't want to pepper spray yourself. Okay, so we have these all chopped up. And the next is the cilantro. So I have a bunch of cilantro here. And I'm going to take probably about a third. This is a grocery store bunch. It's the only thing that did not come from the garden because I just don't have anything growing in the garden. I am going to leave these a little bit full because when you're fermenting, you want all of your ingredients to set below the line of your brine, of your liquid, so that it doesn't touch the air. You want it all to be underneath the liquid so it can do its thing in the liquid. So I'm going to cut the stems off of these and pretty much leave them whole like this. Now, as they ferment and when you pull it out to eat it, you can always give this whole thing, because I have it in big chunks, just a little chop, and it will chop up the pieces of cilantro. Otherwise, if you chop your cilantro up now, or any leafy, if you're gonna put parsley in there, or a basil, or anything that you're gonna put in there that's an herb or a leafy green, it tends to float to the top. It's really hard to keep that down in the brine. So I'm just going to chop the bottoms off there to get most of the stems off. And then just leave it like that. Okay, so now that we've got all of our ingredients chopped up, we're coming over here to our jars and our salt. So we're gonna make our, what I call our pickle potion. And this is the brine that goes in there. Anytime you're gonna ferment a vegetable, you will want to use this ratio of salt to water to make your brine to go into to pickle. So I'm using a pink Himalayan sea salt. You can use a regular sea salt, any kind of salt that does not have stabilizers in it or iodine in it. So I would stay away from table salt or iodized salt, but any kind of like sea salt, or I think just sea salt. Any kind of sea salt would be great for this. The ratio that we want here for our brine is 3 tablespoons of salt to 1 quart of water. So I have my quart jars measured out. These, I'm not going to be making the salsa in these quart jars. I'm going to use this to pour into my larger jars for the brine, but I'm going to make the brine in here. So I'm going to add 3 tablespoons of salt. 1, 2, 3. I'm going to put a lid on this, and then I'm going to shake it up so that all the salt is dissolved into the water. You don't want to add salt into the big jars that you're going to make your salsa in, or any of your pickling vegetables in. You don't want to put the salt in with the vegetables, because you want the salt to be dissolved in your water so that your brine is the right ratio. So I'm going to do that on this one here too. 1, 2, and 3. And we're shaking this up. When you're filling up your jars, to know that you have an actual quart is the bottom ring. So on your jars, let's see, pull up this one. On your jars, there's the threads where your lid goes on here. On the very bottom, there's a thicker ring on the bottom there. That tells you if that is a full jar. So if you have a pint jar and you want to know if you have a pint, or this is a quart jar, so if we have a full quart, it's all filled up to this bottom ring here. It's also a good way to measure, because we know that there's 4 cups in here. And so if you don't have a measuring cup and you need 4 cups of liquid, or if you needed 4 cups of broth for your soup and you had these canned as broth in your pantry, you don't have to measure that out. You just know that that's 4 cups. Little tip there. Okay, so our broth is ready, and now we have our jars that we're going to be making our salsa in. So I'm going to just layer it and just put the tomatoes in there, just like this. And then add in some of the garlic and the onions and the peppers on top. And again, I'm not really measuring, I'm just putting them in there. I'll move this out of the way so you can see this jar. There we go. And you don't have to, you wouldn't even have to layer them so much, except for when this jar, because it is so large, when I'm bringing this out to eat it, I'm going to want this layered up. I'm not going to want all my tomatoes on the bottom and then my onions on the top. These jars are getting pretty full, but if you do not have a full jar, you don't have to worry about it. It's not like canning, where your jar has to have a certain amount of headspace. It's a lot more forgiving. Just pour that right in there. Oh, I forgot to put the cilantro in. Well, the cilantro is going to have to go on the top. good thing I really didn't chop this up. So I'm just gonna shove that right in there. Oh, it'll just shove down into the middle. So now that we have our jars filled with all of our ingredients, I'm taking a wooden spoon and I'm going to press them down. The idea is to get as much of the air pockets, as many of those air pockets out as you can. With fermenting your food, air is the enemy. You don't want air in there. You want it all to all be one mass in there, and then we're gonna fill the rest of the spaces with the brine. There are tools that you can use to smash these down. I just don't have them. I try to keep my kitchen as simple as possible and not have too many different appliances or tools that are used for one specific job. All right, as you can see, this really pushed down a lot, even just with the spoon, and that didn't take very long. But as you go through around here, you can see that all of the air pockets the juices come out of the tomatoes, and the air pockets are all going away. So now we're ready for the brine. So I'm just gonna put the brine right in there. I'm using my spoon again, just to make sure that we have all of the air pockets out. And I see some bubbles that are coming up when I push my spoon just down along the side. So that means there's just a few more air pockets in there. Alrighty, so there is how to make your fermented salsa. I will come back in 3 days and check it and let you know what it's like. But thanks for coming through and joining me. Try it. I mean, try something. Fermented foods are so good for you, whether it be like kombucha or a fermented green bean, pickled green beans, fermented salsa. It's easy to do. The hardest part or the longest part of this process is the chopping. And you don't have to chop all of the vegetables if you don't want to, but we're making salsa, so it's good to do that. But this is gonna sit on the counter for 3 days and we'll see how it works. So it's been 3 days that our salsa has been out on the counter fermenting, and while these guys are doing their pumpkins, I'm gonna go get it ready and then we're gonna taste it.
Yay!
You want some salsa? Salsa. Okay, here's the salsa. It looks like it's separated a little bit, but if you notice, it's hard to see on the camera, but if you notice, there are some bubbles coming up here, and that is the fermentation process there. So we're just going to take the bag that's holding everything down. We're just going to take the bag out. I'm going to just discard that because we don't need it anymore. And there's our salsa. It smells really good. I'm just going to spoon some into this jar or into this bowl, and then we're going to taste it. The taste testing happening. Oh, that's a big chunk of onion, Lo.
There you go, Lo. Yeah, get it.
And I
There you go.
Logan!
Hey, Tanner.
Yeah.
We're not going to yell, please.
No yelling. Okay, Logan. Give it a shot. Yeah, there you go.
Eating angrily.
There you go.
spicy.
Yeah, personally, I like a big onion, right? There you go.
What you think, Lo?
Hot and spicy.
It is hot. It's a little spicy.
Hot and spicy kind of tastes like pickles though.
It's fermented.
Yeah.
It will taste a little pickled. But when
like
you
our
make
pickles.
salsa, normally you put vinegar in it too.
Onions. Not water.
What you think? Tell
Very
me.
delicious.
Tell me.
It is. They're kind of a natural effervescence.
Yeah, it's fizzy.
It's fizzy.
Yes, it's very fizzy.
It's fizzy salsa,
It's fizzy salsa.
and it's delicious.
I'll get some sauce in my mouth.
Put some south in your mouth, Logan. Now, putting some south in your mouth definitely would include like a whole slice of jalapeno.
Oh, yum. Alrighty, well there's the whole bit of how to do fermented salsa. I think it's a hit in this family. And I hope that you try it.
Yeah.
So thank you for watching, and I'll see you later.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye. Bye. Bye.